All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to All In on Real Estate. I'm your host, Aaron Goins. I started this meetup because when I was in the military, no one in my circle talked about real estate. The last time we talked about debt and other finances, enough about real estate. And I want to start a meetup where people can learn about real estate and start building generational wealth for them and them families. So I'm very, very excited for our guest speaker today, Mr. Dan Fradenburgh. How you doing, Dan?
I'm great. I'm real happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Oh man, my pleasure. My pleasure for having you on here, man. So it's been a long time coming. Man, so let's just jump right into it. Dan, what is your story? What is your origin story? How did you get into being an entrepreneur into real estate?
I guess the way to frame it is that there's normally like two ways that you can get into real estate. Either your family was doing it or you went through some sort of coaching program. Like I think that's most of it. I suppose if you're actually going through contracting or something like that, then that'd be like another typical way. But regardless of how many ways there are to get into it, mine's the weirdest, and it's definitely separate from all the others, and it's definitely had its perks. I started working for a real estate company because I owned a CRM agency. And for those of you who don't know what a CRM is, it's when you stop using a spreadsheet to run your business, you upgrade to a CRM so you can email everybody really intelligently. So I made an agency of that, and then I got hired on by a single family residential investment firm that had it had its entertainment arm, it had its coaching arm, it had its construction, contracting, fixing, and flipping, and they were doing 10 houses a month as far as fixing and flipping goes. So. I was watching what they were doing, and I'm going like, wow, that's absolutely amazing. But me being the computer guy, it basically made me go, it's like, well, I don't have the local advantage. So it just didn't seem like something I could pull off and do. But once I got into how commercial real estate works and how syndication works, then I started to realize that there was some space for a guy like me. But the importance of me coming into this industry from that way is that I think I was able to dodge a lot of the what I'd call old boys clubs, just to give it those nasty kind of connotations where you have to be an insider to get anything really accomplished or done, or you basically have to get your hands dirty before you get any real trust from anybody, and I mean that in a negative sense. So I was able to see what coaches were up to, what different investors were up to, and basically learn the game without having to, make any sketchy decisions. So that's why I've been excited to have this way to get into it.
So when you first got into it, what were
Mhm.
some of the challenges that you had?
Okay, so the first one of making the jump was I would describe my role as a technical co-founder. Back then, I wouldn't have had the vocabulary for that because I just had the job experience of being, director of technology and later CTO, and so I very much mentally was still an employee, and I didn't understand, like how corporate finance works as far as balancing and all that kind of fun stuff. So what happened was I met somebody who wanted to build a company. That company never really ended up happening, but part of the job was to find out how does this stuff work in a 360-degree sense. I had all sorts of business experience, especially because of my experience working for web.com. So I was talking to all sorts of small businesses, and then I also have worked with all sorts of retailers in all sorts of different niches, and that has made it so that, like, when I look at what everybody's going on, I just see it in like a different light, and so that's pretty roundabout, and I'm not sure if it really gets you anywhere, but
I mean, no, I mean, this is your origin story. So, I mean, because I want to give a whole listed view of who you are as a person and what you started. So, and where you're going at. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, so what was the first, let's say, couple years like for you? along your journey?
Okay, so great. So because I came from the CTO side, I knew that there was money to be made, and I knew that it wasn't just like a parasitic society, which like that's my digital security background coming out there, which is this we're just ultra suspicious of everything, right? And so when you hear like it's especially because I don't know, I think our society, I think digital people, programmers, because we're like contractors in the sense that we build stuff, and when we're done there's something there that you can think about, right? So because of that productive side, I think we all have to be aware that marketing runs the universe, and so we end up getting really skeptical as far as like how does all this stuff work, because if you just watch cause and effect, marketing is some agency gets somebody with enough assets to do something, gets them excited enough to actually take out a loan or use their own capital to build something, and then usually the marketer turns around to the tech people and say, okay, build whatever it is that this dream was on. But like, I don't feel that a lot of marketers had that vested interest in seeing their clients win. They're just basically getting people excited to spend their money. So like that's the part that I was always distrustful in as I was coming into this business. But since I already knew the proof of concept that there is this money to be made, and what do you do when you run out of your own capital? How do you scale this like well beyond most people's imagination? Especially from my math and scaling background in data, like that from day one, that's what I was looking for. But the biggest problem is the real estate industry is still a bit behind technologically. So in a lot of ways, because real estate people are just entrepreneurs, they're trying to fit together solutions. They don't know how much they're just leaving money at the table by not putting systems in like automations and CRMs in their, investor relations, outbound emails, and then adding on other ways to increase their size of their audience or list. So that's the weird roundabout thing that I brought along to these different sponsors. And, like I'm basically creating a market more or less as I'm making it work. So like, I guess there's one thing that I've been talking to a lot of people about, which is that if you investigate cash on cash rates, 5% is pretty good. Okay. REITs don't generally offer 5%. Okay. And so if you put in like $1 million at 5%, you're getting 50 grand a year. And so if you understand that before you even get started in this business, you know what your effort is worth to people in this community. Okay, that's what you're up against. It's like, okay, so $1 million of my money will perform this amount. And if I'm shelling out, it's like, okay, well, I need to compensate that for my investments and stuff like that. I think it's so pivotal if you're going to understand the amount of challenge that you have in this industry, and that just means why you have to partner. But that's one of the key ideas I think that emphasize, like why I've had what I describe as troubles, but I've also done it through the digital virtual way. So that's been a challenge.
So breaking into the business, what was your first like interactions with others trying to bring a service to them? And how was that received?
Okay, yeah. So the first thing I learned is to ask a whole bunch of questions and not be so big on flapping your gums. And the reason for that is because just like in marketing, like if you're just trying to, like memorize a script and cast a wide net, you're not going to have a whole lot of success because you're going to be barking up the wrong tree 8 times out of 10. So for example, it's like if you're talking to an operator, you can't talk to them the same way you would a passive investor. So you need to get to what that person's role is in a deal. You need to get that out of the way as fast as you possibly can. And then you can start to add value to people, because you can't just like push, hey, I got a book, want to see my book? Or, that like free home evaluation. It's free. That's ripping up Peng Joon. He's an awesome marketer. So.
Okay, so was there okay, I like the path we're going right now. Was there anybody that you follow when you first started? Was it like somebody like you read books? You like, man, I want to kind of be like this person right here.
Sure. Yeah. So as far as that goes, I'll always be grateful to my old boss, Josh Cantwell, for what I learned about single family flipping and how investors think, and also how to run a small business that consistently is in the seven figures, and then balance that act with all the other arms of the business. So like what I've learned from him, I'll always be grateful for. Other than that, Tim Bratz was the mastermind that I was in for a year and a half, and I've just recently got into regular contact with him again. So that's really fantastic. He's the one who opened my eyes to things like a cash out refinance. And funny story, figuring out cash out refinances is when I was actually able to say, okay, real estate is definitely not a scam. And I don't know how long after it was after that, but I bought the domain realestateisascam.com, just basically because I knew I'd be talking to a lot of skeptics. So those are the two guys that are mostly responsible, but getting out of the coaching realm and into more professionals, I'd also say Greg Scully has taught me a ton. Also, Lauren Cadillac down in Texas, she's in DFW. She's an LLM and an in-court attorney. And so like hanging out with people like that, you just can't help but grow. It's fantastic. And their penchant for the truth and reality is so refreshing. Cut all the BS, get down to brass tacks. What does it actually mean? Those are the people who are sitting there having arguments in my head when I'm trying to figure out something to do with real estate.
What do you find the most fascinating about real estate?
So there are a few things. From an economic standpoint, I look all back to feudal times and how it's impacted constitutions, and how the relationship with royalty must have been with actual landlords, and how that's reflected in the tax code. And so specifically the fact that you can't tax wealth. You can only tax like gains or income or something like that. And it's not in the government's best interest to tax wealth directly anyway, because then they'd be in the management business, and that's always a disaster. But basically, I knew well before I had anything to do with real estate about the idea of an on-paper millionaire, and it didn't sound very inviting, I gotta say. But now that I realize that unless your raise each year at your job keeps up with inflation, your boss is actually paying you less each year, then that made me go, oh no, there's got to be another much better game in town. And so the thing for me was, I'm going, well, why don't I find out what the people with the most money are doing, and then see how that can get matched up to where I am or people I know or something like that. So those are the big aha moments. And really, like even just learning what IRR means, I think really explains to people what it's all about. It's like, okay, if you have enough money where you're not going to be withdrawing even in an emergency, but you have to make sure that that capital doesn't decrease in value. You got, if you really are concerned about like 30 years down the road, 40 years down the road, something like that, It's got to be an on paper asset. And the idea of having $1 million sitting in cash in your savings account or checking account or something, it's nonsense unless you're some of my hard money lender friends. That makes perfect sense what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think you bring up something. I mean, I think that we've been taught through real estate about, hey, don't, and for entrepreneurship, don't put your money into the bank. It's not going to grow and things like that. What has been your experience with teaching people these different entities and things like that?
Well, that's fun for me because like I actually got a job at the local music store when I was 16 as a guitar teacher, and so that meant that I was teaching before I even went to college, and also guitar I was essentially self-taught, and so that means that I already knew how I learned. And so, because of that, that's really helped me in teaching in general. But the other thing too is I do it in several languages, right? And so that makes it really easy to explain things, and even easier still because I have an episodic memory, so I can replay what people said in the past in my head. It's handy, especially in music, because you can memorize these big long arpeggios or songs and things like that. So as far as teaching this stuff goes, I'm always going like, how do you take something that is super duper difficult and make it so that an 8-year-old has zero difficulty bringing it in? And the thing is, there are a lot of big fancy people who feel very, very important in their great big shiny buildings. And their job is to make us all feel too stupid to be able to handle our money ourselves and find out how to compare one deal to another or what makes more sense to do with your money. And so a lot of people's livelihoods depend on us just being like, no, I'd rather just be a librarian and make my little salary, and I'm sure I'll be able to retire one day. And they're only thinking that if they haven't done the math, and the whole game is about equity, like deployed capital multiplication and value that keeps up with inflation. Because and of course, if you get paid to own it, that's the best thing out there. You've got 3 layers of defense before you actually have to be on the street.
So, one thing about you, and we were saying in a little bit, is that we both have a media platform. I had this meetup right here. You have your podcast. And how has that journey with the podcast helped you out with your business?
Right. So one of the issues that is a real barrier for somebody who's coming from the digital and remote side. It's like, what do you bring to the table? Like, what exactly is it? And the other thing too is that if I'm over here, getting a wage instead of equity, that means all the deals that are going on, I'm watching everybody and what they're doing and what their concerns are and what blew up and all that kind of stuff. But it's still at arm's length, right? So that part is a challenge in itself. Is like how do you get really into this business if you're that far away? So me, I had to figure out that I come along and I support all the digital sides and like all the necessary infrastructure for legal compliance. That's what I end up bringing along. And so I think that's a little bit off what you were asking there. I think I worked myself into a bit of a corner, but so that was the big challenge for me, getting into this business. And then the digital side, it's just finding the right people who know that if they want to really manage a ton of deal flow, they're going to have scalable systems in place. So that's where I come in, and but oftentimes I'm taking up the slack for whatever else is missing. So that's how I ended up becoming a marketer. And I ended up marketing myself because the only marketing I'd done in the past was for 7-figure businesses. And so it's like, well, can you start somebody from zero? It was a hole in my resume, but that's been the story of my last 3 years, really.
So with the podcast, that's like, has that like gravitated more people for you? Have got build an audience?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Thanks for that. So, yeah. So the podcast itself, it allowed me to put myself in the right rooms with the right people and also have the right subject matter to show people I get it. Okay. One thing, I'm not sure how many people realize it, but like the Chance Encounters podcast is the one that I'm most known for, and it's a 15-minute format, and it's really getting the investor profile with none of the nuance or finding out, about the person's personality or past or anything like that. Because I realize that we all have to meet a lot of people before we can find the right types of syndicators, operators, investors, like whatever it is. And so if we could speed that up, then we can invest the time after the fact to make sure they're legit. So just speeding up the process. So I knew with my podcast that I'd have to be talking to a whole bunch of people anyway. I wanted to make sure that anybody I was talking to knew that I wasn't writing a blank check for their time. So that was really important to me. So I'm going like, okay, so if we make it a 15-minute recording and I emphasize the fact that it's not going to be awkward because I'm going to be, just making sure we just stick to the schedule and we don't go too far into the weeds. And then no matter what, even if there's no overlap between my business or your business, then at least we've got a piece of content. So it's, nobody walks away empty handed. And once you get enough episodes, then you're absolutely treated differently in this space. They see 100+ episodes, and it's like, okay, well, this person has something going on, and so it's getting easier and easier for me to do the welcome calls, and the relationship between that and what I was saying before about coming from a weird side of the business. That's why it's so important to have something that's highly visible like that. Because like when you're first starting out, unless you're taking up positions left, right, and center, who's going to give you airtime, basically?
Right.
So that's really been it. So yeah, this whole podcasting side has been absolutely essential. But and it's not just for people who love attention. I think everybody really needs to understand that. Like I'd be just as happy to be collecting my checks and not be in the internet's face as often as I am. But it just so happens that privacy is very expensive now, and it's outside of my budget. So here I am.
I love it. I love that, man. So, how is it? And I was going to get to that one too. Like how I've always known you as a guy who's networking with everybody. Always mess you about the big screen. And you're so knowledgeable about the things that you talk about. So how has that experience with the networking and really getting yourself out there has benefit you, not just with real estate, but overall?
Mm-hmm. So, like one of the biggest things has to be like, with when I decided that I was going to go from head of technology to eventually be CTO. When I made that decision, that meant that I had to, be laser focused on my duties. Think of, the like if this goes wrong, what do I do to save the day? If that goes wrong, what do I do to save the day? And then just try and think ahead as much different situations as I possibly can. Make sure that the staff wasn't, getting in its own way. These were the things I was really focusing on, but I was also doing that so I could balance that with time with my family. And the thing that missed out was networking. So in other words, I was a digital recluse until basically like 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. I didn't want to have a bunch of stuff on the internet. I'd fit the passive investor profile perfectly. But so jumping over into podcasting and then also into real estate, the most valuable thing has been learning how to network again. And that's a tough thing if you're just used to being in your little family and not being a very public person. But actually being able to talk to people, it's so important because it doesn't matter what business you're in. It's still important. You need to be talking to so many people all the time. Stop networking at your own peril, is what I'm trying to say. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and I feel like you're such a hardworking guy, and put out a lot of your time, man. How do you? I know we kind of went a lot of places, but how do you do time management? How do you manage your time?
Okay, so how I manage my time while I'm running all my own brands, it couldn't be more different from how I am when I'm working for somebody else. Okay, so when I'm working for somebody else, I am ultra progress focused. Okay, so what I've told people for probably about 10 years now is the first priority is whatever is on fire and fast. It has to be both. Okay. And then after that, then you can like kind of get caught up. Okay. And then you can continue on whatever needs to be done, or that are like quick wins after that, just a little, a task that you need to get them done. Just do a bunch of little ones that are easy wins, but you still allocate like, I like to allocate at least like 25 to 30% of my day to long-term projects, things that are going to take, hundreds or thousands of hours to do. That's what I like to do. And then, but it all hinges on communication and clear expectations from everybody involved. So that's my big time management thing. But as far as like little tricks that everybody can do aside from scheduling, I exclusively watch videos at 2 times speed. Okay, exclusively. I actually have an online streaming service that is all college courses and taught by award-winning professors for their teaching. And there's one that's it's law school on constitutional law and like all the different types of law and torts and like Supreme Court judgments, all that kind of stuff. Still 2 times speed. And part of the reason is because if it's important enough to watch it at 1 time speed, it's twice as important when you're watching it at 2 times speed. So if you have troubles keeping boundaries with your family, you can basically say, hey, like the 1 time it's like maybe you take yourself away, but 2 times it's like, no, this is a 15-minute clip. I need 7.5 minutes. So that's one. The other one would be a funny story. I saw the world's fastest reader on the first episode of Jon Stewart's Daily Show. And since then, I was sitting there thinking about questions for him. 10 years later, he was on my phone, the world's fastest reader. And I ended up becoming pals with him. I actually interviewed him, and he read my 32,000 word book in 90 seconds on camera. Okay. And then after he read it, he said, hey, that's the watch. Yeah, you bought that when you were 17. Yeah, you bought it for like $300 and you could have got yourself a Rolex, but you think that's too ostentatious, right? So it was pretty cool. And because I became pals with him, he ended up giving me his course, and that was before I started my CRM agency. And I do think learning to speed read was pivotal in being able to get that level of production to get me to CTO. Because like even just keeping track of your inbox, speed reading is so important. It's just so you can just blast right through it. So there are other apps and stuff like that for speed reading, but the course itself that Howard Berg offers for that's what I'd recommend. And just watch your productivity just go bonkers.
Wow, yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by that. About that, Dan. Really, I think that's very, very smart of you to take that course and like I said, you're being more productive by the day by reading through something. Yeah, that's awesome right there. So I only got like maybe like 1 or 2 questions. I'm gonna let the audience attendees ask you questions. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Wow. With a much, much higher net worth. Basically, like the last 3 years have been the 3 years that I think most people who are going to make the big jump into commercial real estate, it's the 3 years that they dread. Okay, it's the last 3 years that I've just done, and now it's starting to finally pay off. As far as what I think my best chances for fantastic success are, it's like I don't, there's not a whole lot of money in books. So my book, Real Estate is a Scam, part of that was a test to see, like, for search engine optimization. It's like, okay, so how many people will just find it just by going, real estate is a scam? And then, it's nice to have a book because, much like a commercial property, you don't have to put in, like more. You own something that can generate more income without any extra work. So that's one thing. But 506B Me is what I'm expecting will be the bigger vehicle, because as I learned how to legally syndicate, I found out that it's difficult for people who don't have a bunch of rich friends, because they're more or less stuck in either a way more expensive point of entry, or they are stuck with a 506B, which means that they cannot publicly solicit. So 506B is going beyond just going for your exemption and obeying what the SEC wants, but it's like, if the SEC starts to really bare its teeth, I think the way that it's languaged, like if you're sitting there, publicly soliciting people or enticing investors, whatever that's supposed to mean, if you're doing that on the internet, technically they got you and they can yank your exemption. And if they yank your exemption, you have to pay everybody back plus interest. And you wouldn't be syndicating if you were able to afford that. So, that's basically the play. Like, I could paint it worse. Like, I hear that also you might get some people accusing you of fraud. And when you end up bankrupt under that circumstance, and that's when you get into orange suit territory. Pretty scary. And so 506B Me was basically me going like, I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for my friends. I think that social media habits, I saw about 90% of real estate newbies breaking the law by saying, hey, I got this deal. Oh yeah, what kind of raise it? Oh, it's a B. Oh, dude, you can't do that. It's so that's what 506B Me is all about. But really, it's about making more relations and then finding more deals to get involved in with my skill set.
Okay. Man, this has been great. So, last question. What would you like to say to somebody who's just starting off in real estate or just want to learn about being an entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So being an entrepreneur, the biggest thing is, like anything that's get rich quick, like you got to study what the big money is up to just to know what you're up against. So like these days, hustle is not enough, especially because pretty much anybody can get a startup loan and pretty much everybody has all sorts of initiative. But the people with the really deep pockets, they're squeezing the internet. They've been squeezing the internet for a long time. Because I was working from web.com, I was watching the heyday of, courses being sold online, and before Amazon really took over everything for physical products. I was watching them. It's like, hey, why are these guys dropping like flies? And it was also happening with real estate coaching, because Mark Zuckerberg basically said that real estate's a scam. So, all that stuff, I've been watching the whole thing happen. And that's why I'm going like, okay, well, I got to make sure that, what the playing field is like. And the reason why it's like that is because if you have a business and you're going to sell it to somebody, who are you going to ask? The most broke person you know? Of course not. Right? You're going to go to the people who have the means and the experience to take over what you've built or what you own. And so that means the wealthy get first dibs on everything. Okay. And the only way that they don't is if the people who figured it out don't know any wealthy people. So that's really long and short of it. And that's what I found, being in this digital world. But It sounds like I don't know about you guys, but for me, this interview has felt like all me spitting a bunch of shower thoughts.
No, but I mean, you get an interview for a reason, man. I mean, you are a subject matter expert in your field, and you're talking about your field and what and your story. So you are the SMED on that.
Right.
So I'm gonna open up for questions for the attendees. I do have a subject I want to bring up everybody, but it might be an after party kind of subject. Something I found intriguing. So, if anybody have any questions for Dan, please ask away.
First, first I want to say, Dan, thank you very much for coming on tonight. That was great. That was great. A lot of information, man. A lot of information. That's why I always call you Dan the man. So you talked about excuse me, you talked about the reasons why you got started, right? And you also talked about helping other people because of CRM, right? Where we talked the other day, but where should somebody start? Where should somebody who's just coming out, just beginning real estate, what should they do? You talk about the CRM, you talking about they should let go of that spreadsheet. What should they really be doing? And how much time should they devote? How much time should one devote to getting your CRM together before you get started? Is that how important is that?
Okay, so the bigger thing, of course, is that meeting people and interacting with them is far more important than just building a list of people that you don't really know. So that's I want to emphasize that, especially if we have any beginners out there. There's no substitute for, I like to say, kissing hands and shaking babies. So you got to have that. But as far as the CRM goes, yes, you can make a perfectly good business for yourself just using a spreadsheet. Okay. But you will not be leveraging the power of having an enormous contact list. Okay. So with a CRM, that gives you the ability to email your entire list. But spoiler alert is you don't want to do that very often. You want to email very specific people for very specific reasons. And you want those people, you want it so you can find them. They're at the tip of your fingertips, right? The tip of your fingers. You want to be able to say, like I used to get questions all the time. It's like, give me everybody who lives within a 3-hour drive of, Boca Raton. CRMs don't work like that. Okay. As a matter of fact, even as an engineer, I was sitting there going like, okay, so I've got the latitude and longitude, but okay, from north to south, the earth is curved. So it's kind of squashed at the poles. So that means the distance will be different from that. How about we go by states, boss? Sure, states it is, right? The lesson from that is that CRMs are more about how you save your information. Okay, so if you recall, I probably mentioned that I'm CRM agnostic as far as I don't care which platform you actually end up using. Okay, part of that is because I can program my own from scratch. So that's why I don't care. What the real art of it is knowing what you're actually going to need to access. Okay, so if you're going to need to save the information of how far they are from, the Bronx, then you need to save that in a field. And so just have that mapped out as far as what information are you actually going to need to access about people. And then, the compliance is a separate thing. But, my problem with compliance in most CRMs is that at the end of the day, you're putting in your own information. So if somebody wants to say you cooked it, it's pretty much impossible to deny. There's no difference between cooking it and the real thing, except for maybe date stamps, but even those could theoretically be doctored. So that was super in the weeds. It's more for the benefit for anybody in the recording who catches that.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, cool.
Next question for Dan.
I'm glad
Dan,
that
I have one for you.
Sure, go for it, Douglas.
For somebody who's just starting out, this isn't necessarily my category. I've been in the business and around But for somebody who's just starting out in real estate, why should they go ahead and get started with 506B Me now?
Oh, great. I love that question. So the thing about a 506B, see, there's a difference between what the statute, like what I actually read in the law for 506B, there's a difference between that and what you're actually encouraged to do for compliance by securities attorneys. So that difference right there, that's one of the big reasons where like I disagree with the status quo. So, but what everybody agrees on is that you're not allowed, like part of publicly soliciting means that you don't talk to anybody new, okay, once you have the deal under contract. You know, that's some people's interpretations, but of course, from a constitutional law perspective, Congress makes a law mandating an agency to do the work, and then the agency decides the best way to do the mandate, and the judges are like, hey, you guys are the experts, so that's like the law is whatever they say it is, appears to be how it actually works. So with 506B Me though, you would have documented proof of when your relationship started. So if somebody claimed that you publicly solicited them, you'd have some proof that no, we had a substantive relationship, or at least, you know, like it wasn't just pitching any old person. It was, you know, it was involving people who are in the spirit of 506B. So the real reason why some newbie would be well advised by getting a 506B Me account is just so that you don't have to use a great big brain in CRMs and documentation. All you do is you get a QR code just like this one and a link for your profile. You tell people to go there and it does the rest. So just to have that documentation so nobody can say, hey, you publicly solicited me, and then possibly getting your exemption yanked. That's what 506B Me is really for.
And hence the need for a CRM.
Bingo.
Because
Thank
your
you.
dates are there on the day you met. That's one of the things you fill out. Is the day you met and how you met. And then in your CRM, if you use it properly, all your emails are there so that somebody could see the times that you've emailed them or if you've called them. And if you use your CRM the way it's meant to be used, everything's tracked for you.
Yeah, definitely. And that was a huge part of my job working for these different companies was, you know, making sure that those timestamps were there. But because I was in that business, I was going like, well, wait a second. Apple iTunes has taught everybody to scroll down to the bottom and hit I accept. So web forms, they don't hit me as proof. Like the actual data you get on the admin side is somebody with this kind of a device with this resolution at this IP address used this email address. Is that the same as proof that that person did it? It looks like circumstantial evidence to me, but I was going like, well, if I have a system that tracks access to a compliance video where it's talking about, you know, it exposes the person's appetite for risk, level of sophistication and whatnot, then the relationship is third party verified and you have zero ability to cook the books. I ensure that. So that's the extra abundance of caution that I'm trying to go for. And I get that for a lot of people, especially like yourself, Peggy, who's, you know, been involved in this business for a while. It's overkill for you, I believe. I don't think anybody would hold you to that standard, but people who are new, if an administration decides they want to start getting rid of landlords, as far as I'm concerned, we're wide open. So I got Brandon Young saying, what would I do right now with my knowledge to go from 0 to 1 million? Because I was talking about networking, that has to be, you know, like it's so important that it's all of the story. Okay. So it really depends on who's in your group of friends. And the other thing too is like, how can you actually get to a position of authority and where people will respect you so that they see, hey, this person will actually do what they say they will. and I won't have to babysit them all the time. Okay, that's what you're looking for. Figure out the thing that, is worth a whole bunch of money and nobody wants to do it. And find a way to do that for people who can afford to pay what it's worth. So you have to do that. And then you can go ahead and try and get sweat equity positions in commercial buildings, just do these different things and not be paid back in cash. But, your bills are going to come up really, really fast. And I don't think it's viable. This is not a poor man's game. And if you got all sorts of skills and talents and stuff like that, then I think, sure, you can pull it off, but don't quit your W-2 is the fast way of saying it. Don't quit your W-2 until you've already got this ironed out and you've done the math and you know how it's going to work. But you got to get those positions. You got to get that deployed capital. You got to get that multiplication working in your favor, because you got to beat inflation. If you just arrive on shore with a couple $1 million in suitcases, inflation is going to eat you alive. It's not going to be great for you. So you have to get assets that actually keep up with inflation, and better yet, if they can actually pay you because you own them, that is the gold standard. What if someone else creates a platform similar to 506B Me? How do I protect myself? Thank you for asking. So there are a couple things that are proprietary in the actual compliance video. One of them is I've got a really nice way to have an idea of where you are on your financial arc. And so it's one that you're not uncomfortable sharing it, and it also gives enough information. So the motivation piece, I say, some people are looking to preserve their purchasing power. Other people are looking to trade their time directly for wealth rather than for income. So that's why they're approaching it. And I was describing myself in that case. Some people are looking to fast track their retirement. Some people are just plain ambitious. So they realize they need to own pieces of very expensive things to, satisfy that. And then the last kind is trying to save the world. So if you think about those 5 different motivations, it's clearly something that I'm the only one who'd come up with. And the other thing too, is you can also see how it's like, okay, well, yeah, people who are interested in this, they're not really going to be on that one so much, or they might be 2 or something, but it's not really going to be people who are all 5. But the other thing, of course, is the Dan Does Deals commercial roll die. You can get your copy for free. You don't even have to give your email address at dandoesdeals.com. It has the 6 different rolls in a commercial deal. And every single time one of the interviews happens, part of it to make sure that the audience understands what the profile, whoever owns that profile, just to make sure that they understand how they fit into a deal. I go through it from scratch every single time. You need one of these, you need one of these, you want one of these, you need some of this, sprinkle some of this on top, then you got a commercial real estate deal. You don't have them, no commercial real estate deal. So there's some things that are proprietary about how people share their information that you wouldn't be able to do an exact duplicate, and you'd also have to have a snappier name than 506B Me. So could I sue them for, copying the idea and what I'm up to? I'm confident I could, but they'd also have to make a bunch of money first before it would even work. So, that's my answer. So. And then what would I do if I had $1 million? It's I would have $1 million. I'd hope I wouldn't have $1 million after 30 days. Okay, that's kind of an arbitrary number. The whole idea is that I'd be looking for everywhere to deploy it at the best rates possible, because I don't have any real value for big lump sums of cash. I would want that getting me my hopefully 5% or so ASAP.
Get 10.
Get 10, exactly. So that's what I'd be saying.
10.
Right, exactly. I'd be talking to even more people and I'd just be saying, okay, so which one is it? I'd be all passive positions and then I'd be back to work doing exactly what I'm doing. So that's what I do with $1 million. I don't know if he was asking for specific asset classes though.
If you have $1 million, at least you've become an accredited investor.
Exactly.
1, 2, if you invest that properly, you should have about 5 million in 5 years. Just keep it working.
Exactly. Exactly. And there we have it.
Any more questions for Dan? Any more questions for Dan?
I'm just glad that we got, Lawrence asking the question right up front, because I was a little bit concerned Peggy would come on and say, yeah, Dan, we had an interview about what is it exactly it is that you do. And I still don't get it. And it's not my fault. I know. It's just, oh no. Yeah, that's kind of what was going through my head. It's just like, holy smokes. Yeah, because like listening to all of this kind of stuff, it didn't really help color that picture in one little bit. But I'm cool with that, because that's the weird thing about what I'm up to. If you want to know the secret sauce for my social media, it's all because I know it doesn't matter until I shake your hand. That's why I'm not selling people constantly. It's because chances are when I put the pieces of the puzzle together, you're like, oh, cool, that makes sense. I don't need that, but that makes perfect sense. So it's like, then why go through all the effort and forcing people to go through all those mental gymnastics? It's if you're looking to upgrade from your spreadsheet to your CRM, though, I'll become very popular to you. So
yeah. And everybody's journey is different. Mm-hmm. That's what's so interesting. That's what I like about Aaron's meetings, because he asks the same questions and every story is different.
Awesome. Well, I'm just glad that everybody came. This is really fantastic.
Fred just came on here. Okay. Well, look, I just want to say thank you to Dan for this awesome Q&A session. I think a lot of people I know that people, once they hear the recording, get a lot out of it. I know attendees got a lot out of it. I think you talk about a lot of various things, but a lot of great knowledge on it. And like I said, I'm really intrigued by the the speed reading and things like that. And definitely want to hear more from you about that. So that's going to talk a lot offline about that. But yeah,
I got one more thing about you, which I wanted to wait for this because you don't know about this. But when I was first doing some meetups, you, Aaron, were my plumb line. Okay, so that I got those Gilbert Gottfried clips, all that really, really out there stuff, and my plumb line when I was in those meetings to figure out, okay, am I getting it just right for this crowd? Is like the second you start going like this, then I'm like, okay, good, leave it right there. Perfect.
Look at Lauren's face. Look at Lauren's face there.
Yeah, because he's been there when you weren't around to be the plumb line, and then the line was passed, and then we forgot about the line, and then it just yeah.
I love it. Oh man. Look, guys, I'm not kicking nobody off. We still have the after party. We talk for a little bit. But I just want to say thank you to Dan. And also let you guys know that we'll be here next week. We took a week off last week, but we'll be here next week, and we have some good guests for the rest of the month and into the future. So I will talk to you guys later. God bless you and take care.